Okay. Ah, okay, so I am now live. So this is, yep, we shall see if anyone comes online and okay, so I am now live. Oh, we are, now we're live. So this is we shall see if anyone comes online. Turn that off. Oh, we are now. We're live. Okay, I seem to have some viewers, which I'm surprised about, really, considering this is my first live streaming, proper one anyway. So we'll see how many more people come on. We'll just wait a couple of minutes. So, talking about the Indigo Insight, the Tarot hint cards. Whether this music in the background is too distracting. There we go, I'll turn that off. It says that 3 are watching, and I know that one of them is my own YouTube dashboard, so there's 2 people watching, which is interesting. Thank you very much for coming along. We'll start. I'll just start talking in about 5 past 7 in about 2 minutes time. We'll see where this goes. I was thinking that I might do some other live chat. If this is successful and it works, then I might do some other live chat or live streaming on other subjects. Like we could do psychology, we could do tarot cards, we could do astrology, Reiki, NLP, language patterns. I mean, anything along those lines, really, if anyone is interested. I quite like how this tree background looks like I've got a tree branches growing out of my head. I don't know whether that music is too distracting or not. This is still a little bit new to me, streaming live. I've used this program to do recorded videos, but never live. So anyway, it's 7:05. You know, we could probably wait around all night for someone else to come online. So if you're here, welcome. I'm going to be talking about the Indigo Insight Tarot Hint cards. I might as well start talking because I know that when I watch other live streams, you can actually go back. So if anyone is here, if you can actually say in the chat box whether you can hear me okay, that would be great. I did check the audio levels earlier, and to me they look fine, but I don't know whether you're hearing me okay. Let me type something in. Can you hear me okay? Maybe they can't hear me, and that's why they're not responding. Okay. I'm just going to talk anyway, and if people come on, they come on, and if they don't, they don't, then I'll be talking to myself. The Tarot Hint cards. The Tarot Hint cards came about from an idea, an inspiration that I had about 1.5 years ago, because I've been reading tarot cards for 30+ years, a long time, but in a very, very small way, and professionally only really in the last 2.5 years, I think it is, something like that. And I just, you know, I just started using them a lot more and actually doing paid readings and such like for people, whereas before I was like doing it mostly for myself, family, close friends, and anyone else, you know, around. And then, you know, I went on a course, a tarot course, because I struggled with the minor arcana, believe it or not, because up until that point I really wasn't using the minor arcana an awful lot. I was just using the major arcana, and you know, that worked perfectly okay for 30 odd years. And then I thought I need to really get to grips with the whole deck, and so I went on a course, and which worked out really, really well. And I was inspired by someone else that said, wouldn't it be great if you had like cheat sheets? You know, they call them cheat sheets or hint cards. And I thought, wow, that's actually really, really quite a good idea, because the little white book that comes with most tarot decks, you know, while it gives you a good kind of overview really of your card deck that you happen to have, you can't really be, you know, can't really be sort of flicking through the book every time you want to try and find the interpretation for a card. So I just thought, well, you know, what if I created a card? Okay, this is the coins, you know, and then you've got all the numbered, you know, numbers of the cards, etc., and the court decks, the court cards rather. And I thought, wouldn't it be useful if you could have a quick reference card that had sort of the positives and the negatives of each card with just a few keywords. So the task, the challenge began. I started to not only look at the cards that I have been using, but I also started researching other tarot hint cards, tarot decks, and looking through the manuals and such like, and came up with, you know, common words and keywords that explained what each of those cards were. So I then thought, well, you know, if I just produced this, so it kind of started off with, I'll do the minor arcana and the major arcana sort of, you know, hint cards, and the whole idea of them was that you could actually just spread them out very, very quickly in front of you, and without, you know, reading through any little tiny book, could very, very easily just pick up, you know, the you know, look at the, because they're not that much bigger than a normal hang on, let me get that right. So, you know, they're not that much bigger than a normal deck card, and it caught on. So I did some tests, and I made some sort of deck, you know, these hint cards, and I showed them to a couple of people. So my wife was also interested in reading tarot, and so I did sort of a deck for her and said, you know, look here, see what you think. See if you like these guys. And of course she really liked them, so, you know, that worked out really quite well. And then I printed some more myself and shared them around with some other people, and sort of, you know, get some feedback about, you know, what people thought of them. And it kind of escalated from there, actually quite rapidly. I then started getting emails from people who saw the cards that other people were using and saying, you know, can I have a set, can I have a set, and, you know, do you sell them, etc., etc. And I thought, well, you know, maybe I should design them a little bit better, a bit more professional. And then while I was designing, if you like, the minor arcana and major arcana hint decks, I then started coming up and, you know, coming up with ideas. It sort of just escalated in my head, as it were, and then I came up with sort of these other cards. So of course, you know, pretty much everyone struggles with the court cards, and then I came up with a spreads card, correspondences, which are, you know, quite handy, you know, the Celtic cross. And I mean, there's, you know, these are not the be all and end all of everything on tarot spreads and decks and stuff like that. So, and then obviously, you know, for the absolute beginner, 4 steps to read a tarot. And then I went into some more advanced cards, which came kind of a few months after I printed the first run, which was the advanced court card, you know, to do with elements and such like, and then the Kabbalah, and then some, you know, the most common symbolism used in each of the tarot cards. And it kind of just grew and then stopped at that particular you know, number of cards. And it's just grown. It's just really grown. So over the last year, I've sent these out all over the world and continue to keep sending them out. And they're available on our Etsy shop, and I advertise them on 2 forums that I belong to. I belong to the Tarot Professionals forum, and I'm also a registered member with them, and also the Tarot Nerds. They have an opportunity for people on a Sunday to advertise, and I get, you know, I get a number of these. I mean, I sell, you know, I'm not selling hundreds of them, but I sell them quite frequently, literally all over the world. I've sent these cards. So as I say, they're available on Etsy. I'm not a hard seller of stuff, but the words has got around, and a lot of people like them. And you know what the truth is, I actually still have these available. I always carry these with me. Because you have blank moments, and that's where these cards come in handy. You can use them for learning. For the absolute beginner, they're good for learning, but they're also good for when you're doing live readings and such like for people, or you're in front of people. If you're flicking through a book to try and get the key words for a card, I don't think it looks particularly professional. But if you're just picking up a card and you can quite easily see, boom, straight away, you're there straight away with just this card, and it's not particularly big and such like. So that's kind of the history. Anyway, I've waffled on about that enough, really. But that's the history, and that's where they came from. And from this, just as a bit of a side note, from this I've had people asking me to do similar ones for Lenormand, Oracle cards. And Oracle cards are a bit difficult because Oracle cards tend to have their own interpretation from Oracle deck to Oracle deck. So I actually love, this is the deck that I love. The only Oracle deck really that I use is this deck, and I use it with my main deck, but I love this. I just love this deck, Wisdom of the Oracle. This is just such a lovely deck, and it fits in so nicely. When I do a reading, I usually bring out a couple of Oracle cards at the end of a reading to give further insight, sort of higher level insight and inspiration and such like, whatever it is the client really needs. So it'd be difficult to do hint cards for that, but yeah, I've been asked to do astrology cards, and I've kind of got the designs in my head for doing astrology cards. But I've done a couple of videos already about the use of these cards. You can get someone else to take the cards and just read off. If you're trying to learn how to find the interpretation or the key words, that's really all you need when you're starting tarot card reading, is the key words. What does the Five of Wands, for instance, so somebody could actually take these and test you on them, and they can take the cards and say, well, what do the Five of Wands mean? What are the key words for that? And then you've just got a few words to learn. Then the more you use these cards and the more you use the tarot cards and such like, you end up actually not using the major and minor arcana hint cards at all, which is which I've seen a lot of people do. So they're good for learning. They're very good for learning. They're good for just refreshing yourself, going through each of the cards and looking to see what just picking random cards and then trying to remember what that is, and then because you've got these laid out in front of you, you can see them quite clearly. Very quickly you can just refer to what the key words are. So they're useful in that way as well. They're useful to just have to the side. If you're doing online readings, especially, if you're doing live readings or you're doing Skype readings or such like, the client doesn't necessarily know that you've got them there, and I don't think that's being deceitful. It's just that it interrupts your flow if you get stuck on a particular card in a position, and it does happen. I mean, I've been doing readings, as I say, for 30 years, and sometimes I still get I draw a blank sometimes. You just hit like almost an intuition brick wall, and sometimes the flow can be interrupted as well, especially if your client asks you a question part of the way through your interpretation, and then referring back to the card can get you back in that flow again, the hint card for that particular position or that card. So they're good for that as well, just very good for reference. The other cards I do go into now. The court cards are quite interesting. If any of the cards I keep to hand when I do my own readings is going to be the court cards, the hint cards, because The court cards, I was taught, are basically they're archetypes of people, but they can also represent resources or qualities, or they can, you know, they obviously can represent people as well. And so, you know, that can also be a bit of a stumbling block if you're doing a reading for someone. And if anything, I have both of these to hand above any of the other cards, because I don't, you know, maybe it's just me, but it isn't just me, because I know other people struggle with court cards. But again, because this is quite simplistic, it's you know, you got the kings, the queens, the knights and the pages, and then for each of the suits then you've got, you know, a couple of 1 or 2 key words for each of them. And then, you know, like the kings are authority, maturity of advices for the queens, the knights are usually about action, and the pages are usually about messages or cycles, but also young people. And the knights are very often, you know, people in their 20s or their 30s, you know, energetic. Queens are obviously the maturity and the advice aspect, or the qualities that you could be looking for. And then the kings are about authority, about stability, about decision making, you know, the grounding part, you know, it's like the father figure. And then with the advanced court card, it goes into the elemental influences for each card and how pure it is related to each suit and each court card, which is also quite useful, you know, because they are related to the elements, so air, earth, water and fire, or air, earth, fire and water. And yeah, so I use this one for people who get potentially more court cards in a reading than any other card, you know, and then that weighs quite heavily, to do with influences and potentially people or resources or archetypes, to do with their card reading. So they're also quite useful. The spreads. Okay, so there's 2 cards here to do with the spreads. There's one which is the Celtic Cross. Now, I used to use the Celtic Cross a lot. I think everyone does actually. You get taught to do the Celtic Cross because you sort of almost believe in it. It's relatively easy and simple to follow. I mean, the placement of the cards can change. I've seen so many variations of the Celtic Cross. And I worried at one point when I first started reading cards about, you know, well, was it correct? Was I actually doing it the right way around? And was I, you know, interpreting the cards incorrectly if it was the wrong place, you know, the card was in the wrong place? And of course, as long as the placement of the card relates to, you know, whether it's the goal, you know, the present position, what's actually influencing the person at the right time, you know, at that particular time, it doesn't really matter where it is, as long as you know what the interpretation of that card is, like most tarot card readings. And so, you know, I put that in there, and you know, that's not the be all and end all of the Celtic Cross, but that's what I was taught. The ones that I think that are most useful, and these are the spreads that I use actually the most, and they are called advanced spreads because there aren't that many people that can do three card readings and get a whole interpretation from 3 cards, with you know, potentially some more you know, specific cards coming in after that. So, you know, you've got the 3 card spread, the 9 card, and then the 21 card spread, which is what I tend to use for a timeline anywhere between 9 and 12 months. And then this one here is probably one of the most common that I use for people who want real detail about their current situation and where things are going. You get an above and below kind of influence on that timeline, on that you know, the significator card in the middle, and then what's in front, what's behind, what above, what's below, and then obviously some more specific cards you can just add. It's typically the 9 card spread that I will then bring in the oracle cards to add more insight into the reading. But, it just depends on how I'm feeling at the time, whether it, the gut feeling says that you should use them. And again, this is not the be all and end all of all spreads. This is just to help people that buy the cards expand their repertoire, as it were, with using the tarot. And and of course there's 1,000,001 different types of spreads out there. Correspondences, quite useful. Again, simplistic, to the point. The most common correspondences used. There's also a correspondence to normal playing deck, which of course is where a lot of my grandmother used to read cards, and she just used a normal deck of cards. Baffled me at the time how on earth you do that, but without any but people did. I mean, and I guess people still do. But there's all sorts of correspondences on here which can add more insight into your card reading. Things like elements, colours, the seasons, the zodiac, the elements, and such like. So, that's also quite an interesting card. I guess this is really the first card that, the 4 steps to read a card. Again, very, very simplistic, but helps people to try and read tarot cards in a relatively intuitive way. I believe that typically nearly everyone I come across, very, very few people would pick up a deck and start never having either been on a course or learnt the tarot in any way. Would pick up something intuitively. They tend to read the book that comes with it, the little white book. They might go out and buy a tarot book, one of the bigger books that come for the deck of cards, or they might just buy a general book about tarot and go from there. But yeah, it's just very simplistic, 4 steps to read a card and read a tarot card. And again, you expand on that, so it's kind of a stepping stone. Now, symbolism. This is, I have got a database that contains hundreds of symbolism interpretations for decks, and you can't get that on one card this particular size. So I basically just chose the most common symbolisms that you would find in the Rider-Waite deck. The Rider-Waite deck, or any deck. This is the vice versa deck. Sorry, I keep getting it around the wrong way there. Vice versa deck, which is one of my go-to decks. Any deck that's based on the Rider-Waite, Rider-Waite-Smith cards. These, symbolisms. I mean, I've got another deck that I use is the Modern Spellcasters deck, and this has got more symbolism in it that you wouldn't really ever come across, but I have got all these on my database. There's symbols for all sorts of things on this particular deck, like squirrels, for instance, and all sorts of things. And it's actually quite interesting. There's a blindfolded squirrel in there. I mean, you could just go on and on and on, and you'd end up with sort of 4 or 5 of these cards this size with all the symbolism on there. But anyway, that's again just a stepping stone. That's all these tarot hint cards are really for. And then for those that are into Kabbalah and more complicated systems, obviously this is based on the placement of the cards that Crowley did. And yeah, I mean, if you wanted to go down that route, again, it's just a quick reference card if you're into that, that you can refer to. So anyway, I've waffled on enough about that, really. I think I was going to really wait to see if anyone had any questions. I mean, I don't know who's actually watching right now. It says there's 3. Well, there's going to be 2 people watching, so if you are watching and you have a question about these cards or just anything with tarot in general, I mean, I can keep waffling away, but if I would prefer if somebody had some questions, would be useful. I could go through the decks that I use, most common. I mean, the Tarot Hint cards are really, they're really based on the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. You know, because that seems, you know, that generally tends to be the most common deck. There are obviously a lot of indie decks out there. There are a lot of specialized decks that you know, these Tarot Hint cards probably wouldn't, you know, where they start breaking away from the Rider-Waite Smith, and they maybe, you know, I mean, it's not, these cards are not going to be really that good for using with the Hermetic deck, for instance, or the Thoth deck, you know, because it's that sort of a slightly different system. But generally speaking, this is Rider-Waite focused. No questions. Okay. Well, I could talk about my decks if no one's got any questions. I kind of guessed this would happen actually on the first streaming. But so what did I start off reading? So my very first deck was the 1JJ Swiss, which was a crazy deck to start with. I then got into the Tower of the Old Path, which is a kind of a Wiccan based deck. I then, actually I can't remember whether I had the Tower of the Witches, which is the deck that was used in a 007 film, Bond film. I didn't, it was the proper deck, if you like, not the 007 deck that I actually used. And again, what I was the reason why I was struggling with the Minor Arcana is because they were all pip decks, and they didn't have any symbolisms in them for the Minor Arcana. And so I didn't know, I don't know why, but I didn't know about the Rider-Waite-Smith deck at that point. It wasn't made known to me 30 plus years ago, you know, that I should have really started off with this deck. And if only I had done, I probably would have progressed a lot further than I am now. But so you know, I didn't really know until I kind of went on this tarot course, and then of course it all started making sense to me, which is one of the reasons why I started going into doing readings professionally, because I just picked up the Minor Arcana really quickly, because I'd been using the Major Arcana for 30 plus years, not really understanding how the pip decks worked or what they meant, even after reading the little manual and tarot books and such like. It just did not make sense to me. Went on this course, and hey presto, it clicked with me that, you know, you really need to use the whole deck. And now I just, you know, I use the whole deck. And it was at that point that, I don't know why it took me such a long time to realise about the Rider-Waite-Smith, that the other decks were actually based on the Rider-Waite-Smith, but I just didn't know because they were pip decks. So then I kind of progressed on, went and bought myself a Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and thought, oh, right, okay, and it all started making sense. And I think, like most people do with tarot cards, you kind of go through, you think about, you know, you come across decks, you go to a shop and you see all these decks on there, and the pictures on the front look really good, and then you learn that you need to really click with a deck. So immediately I bought a Rider-Waite-Smith, proper Rider-Waite-Smith deck. It clicked with me, and I thought, this is why, you know, for the last 30 years I'd not really been, you know, working really very well with the Minor Arcana. And so yeah, it started to work, and of course I picked them up really quickly, apart from the court cards of course, and just moved on. And then I went through sort of 20 decks, and I ended up then with 4 decks that I use all the time. So my main deck is this one, which is the Witch's Tarot. I love this deck. I really click with this deck. This deck at the moment for me is just, you know, this is the one that just gets used on all of my, or most of my readings. You know, I just click with this. I don't even need to think. And I'm guessing that's the intuition kicking in. I just love the way this deck works. It just speaks to me. It's very accurate. It's very precise. Bit of an eye-opener. And with that deck, I nearly always use the Oracle cards, the Wisdom of the Oracle. And again, I love these cards. They just, you know, they really just click with most readings that I do. I just really love them. And my second most used deck is the Vice Versa. Now, I've done a lot of video, you know, a few videos about this deck. I just love this deck. And I love the complicity of it, but also again the directness, because they are double-sided. So this is obviously the sun, and then you have that on the back. You know, so they call this side, and then it's this side. It's not called the reverse. It's not the reverse of, you're just looking at the deck. It's a little bit, well, no, it isn't like the After Tarot, but you know, you're looking at things from a different angle, basically. So the Five of Wands, and then you look at it there and look what's going on in the background. You know, sort of a disaster thing happening on there, but people are squabbling about, you know, minor things, and there's bigger things you know, happening in the background. You know, the Knight of Swords, and then this very similar actually. It's just that from a different angle, with sort of thunderous clouds going on, birds in there and such like. So, you know, this is the deck that I use quite a lot, and this is the deck that I walk around with. I always have this deck with me. You know, this is the one that I use with me all the time. I keep with me. And then when I want to change things up a bit, I like this Modern Spellcasters deck. This is a bit like the Witch's Tarot. You know, again, I love the way this deck just clicks with me. All of these just make sense to me, and I work with this deck really well. I quite like the change of symbolism and such like in there. Again, just works really well. So they're my main deck. They're my working decks, what I call my working decks. They're the decks that I use on a regular basis when I do tarot card readings, and whatever I feel drawn to, I use those decks. And when I'm doing tarot card readings for people, the majority of tarot card readings are I record them, and then I upload them as unlisted onto my YouTube, onto this particular YouTube channel, and they're unlisted, so no one else knows that they're there. And then I send the client the link, and they can watch it as many times as they want. But the cards that I will have, the tarot hint cards that I will have, you know, I mean 90%, I would say 95% of the time, I don't ever refer to these cards. The only times I actually refer to these is usually to do with the court cards. So the cards that I will have, you know, just off screen, as it were, and to my side, while, you know, out of shot of the video, will be these, because I just literally can glance at them and think, right, okay, yeah, that's what that means. You know, is this a resource? Is this a person? Is this a quality? Is this an archetype? You know, and it just helps the flow. That's what the cards are really good for. So that you don't lose sight of your reading, you know, that you're doing for someone. Okay, I might cut this. I was going to do this for about an hour. I mean, I could keep waffling, but there aren't any questions, and there is still only 3 people watching, so I might call it a day or an evening on this. But yeah, these are available on our website. I mean, if you just search Indigo Insight or go to our Facebook page, the links are actually on nearly all the videos that I do here on YouTube as well. And we're having an Etsy shop where these are available. Again, we ship all over the world, so you know there's not a problem with that at all. Shipping in some areas is actually quite expensive, but these are really good quality cards. They're not cheap, you know, they're not as thin as tarot cards. They are actually quite heavy quality, and they come in a little plastic protective little wallet for you to put them in. And this is how I normally have them. I just literally have them, you know, in my bag, you know, like that, to hand, and it keeps them nice and clean. I round the corners off myself, actually. They come with square, they come square, because to actually get this rounded at the printers costs so much money, it's unreal. But I just got like a little edge punch, and the same thing that people use for, you know, people who cut their cards, trim their cards. So it's just the same thing, just, you know, makes them nice and usable. And anyway, I think I will stop this stream now as my first one. I mean, if anyone watches this video and likes this kind of live stream, I mean, this maybe Thursday night is not a particularly good night to do live streaming. I tend to be doing other things on a Friday night. I do free tarot card readings on our Facebook page on a Friday, so you're quite welcome to. I do just have that available for 1 hour. That's it, and you can have a, you know, a 3-card reading for free, 15-20 minute reading. So you're quite welcome to do that. And yeah, I mean, if you'd like to see any other subjects me talking about live, then do please leave a comment. Anyway, I think I will close this. There's no comments coming up here, so if you have been watching, whoever has been watching this, thank you very much. And I will hopefully see you again in another video soon, maybe another live stream. I actually quite like this, so we shall see if it's useful or beneficial to anyone for me to do any more. So anyway, thanks very much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.